What's good with YouTube? You already know, Big Flacco with a convict's perspective. And I'm going to smash, dash, slide on through with that little bit of energy. What's cracking, people? Hope everybody had an inspired day. I hope my microphone's working better, man. But before we start, man, let's hit the bell notification. Let's hit the subscribe button, like, and comment, help support this channel, man. So today, man, I got an interesting topic, something a little different. What happened to the OGs, man? What happened to the traditional veterano? You know, as a kid, growing up out there in the calles, right? As a youngster trying to gangbang, you used to have OGs that'd be out there in the streets, man. You know what I'm saying? They just get home from the pinta, big old fucking brocha, older vatos walking around like this. You know what I'm saying? Strutting, man. Just, you know, hey, carnal, just did 5 years in Folsom or Soledad. I was just in Chole and was just up in Guinmas home. So all the homeboys and shit, eh? You know, that was kind of the tradition you experienced, man. You know, to where so much that you would think that someone that was a familiano NF would have a big old brocha, would do time in the pen, it would be all fucking swole. That was like what you thought of back in the days. But I learned later on, looks could be deceiving, you know what I'm saying? But in any event, man, when I used to go to Santa Clara County Jail, right, there would always be older homeboys that would take you under the wing. I remember the homeboy Wedo from Vital Horseshoe. I remember fucking Ralph Camacho. All these older cats, man, would be up in there, right? And they'd be up in their 40s and 50s, man, healthy, working out, you know, keeping it solid. They didn't prison politic, though. They respected it. They were plugged in. They knew people. If something had to be done, they would do it. But they would leave the politics for the NF, leave the politics for the structure. You know what I'm saying? And they would be out there on those main lines. You know what I'm saying? It wouldn't be uncommon to go to a prison and you'd see OGs in their 40s and 50s out there. Things started to change, man. And this is even within the Sureños. A lot of Sureños used to have OG homeboys out there in those lineas as well. Nowadays, it's hard to see if there's anybody that's over 40 on the main line nowadays. You know, not saying that there isn't, but it's very rare. And I've always told people, once the politics in prison changed to where every group fell under the bandera of one particular organization, it changed things a lot, man. Because back in the days, the structure used to take care of things on the main line. The Southsiders, you'd always have an OG Southsider running the car. A couple of dudes that had the Llaves. They changed their chain of command for a minute, but you had OGs out there, man. And a lot of them would do their time, do their jale, fucking do their fucking dope, do their issue. And when it was time to get off, they would get off. But they would have their hustle, doing tattoos, picking cups, making little boots and boxing gloves, whatever their hustle was. But they were out there on those lineas. And see, the basic expectations on these yards due to prison politics was it was just a respectful basis to back up your own, know the fucking areas you're supposed to go in, which area you can't go in, and, you know, always bring another homeboy with you. So you would have all kinds of OGs on these yards. Things started to change for the Norteños probably around after 497. 497 was when they did the change from the bros. There was no longer called Hermanos or NR. And Norteños were called Northerners. See, back in the days, a Norteño was just a regular Northerner. Okay, someone who was from up north, you know what I'm saying? Whether they gang made or not, but they represented the cause. You know what I'm saying? A bro was someone who was under a political movement, who was obligated for life, had to get recruited, had to be educated, and had a full commitment on those yards. Now, with these changes, you still had hermanos, but they were called Norteño soldados. And what was going on was now Northerners were falling under the Norteño bylaws, whereas before these bylaws were just for structure members. You know what I'm saying? Therefore, some of you guys have been to prison in the last 15 years, right? But before this, you didn't have to do all these NA interrogations. You didn't have to do all this reporting. The only time you had to do that, clecha or any of that stuff, was when you was in the oil. When you went to the hole, you were going to fall under the guidelines of what the casa expected. Education, máquina, and whatnot. Out there in the lineas, you fell under the homeboys bandera, but you know what I'm saying? The expectations were not as extreme as they are nowadays. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, it was just basic expectations. You know what I'm saying? Follow, always walk in twos, be up at bar lock, right? And when it's time to get off, get off. Those were the only expectations. Now, in a time of war, if you didn't have numbers, then there'd be a little bit more expectations, and a lot of dudes had no problem doing it, man. But for the most part, this is what was expected of you. And you had a lot more dudes that were out there on these lineas. You know what I'm saying? Drugs was a big influence as well because once the OGs were being told that they could no longer use drugs, a lot of dudes fell off, man. Let's just keep it real. A lot of them got those are drug addicts. You know what I'm saying? That's just the reality of it. So when they got to prison, they wanted to get their fucking commissary, they wanted to get their drugs, they wanted to get their hustle on, get their visits. Now, if the op wanted to get off and there was issues, they were ready to ride. And see, that's how it was in prison in the 80s and 90s. And you'd have people out there, you didn't have no SNY. You know what I'm saying, at that time for these people to go to these yards. So a dude could get hit at this prison and get transferred to the next prison, and he tried to fucking go undercover like he didn't do nothing until he's found out that he gets removed again. Eventually, they started to create this thing called SNY. So before there was no place to hide. You know what I'm saying? You'd have to be out there in those lines. Like you had dudes that were NF dropouts that were out there on those main lines back in the 80s and 90s. Some of them were found out. Some of them were even left alone. If they weren't a threat, fucking why even deal with it? Because at that time, that's the structure used to look at it. It wasn't their business, you know. But this is what changed the OGs. That's why you don't see OGs out there like you used to. You know, back in the days, it'd be common to sit there and go to Santa Clara County Jail. You'd have so many fucking homeboys. You know what I'm saying? Now they're all youngsters. You know what I'm saying? Now they're all kids. You know, this is from my experience, what I seen. And whereas when I first did the system in the 90s, there was OGs that were there pushing that line, representing. You didn't see the big old homeboy with a bro shot, the veterano, and the dude that's been solid for 30, 40 years. They were now on the SNY side. It was crazy, you know? And I think the changes in policy and procedure is what created this. I really do. I think if they would have maintained how it traditionally was and had a little bit more checks and balances on the NR, we'd probably have more people, OGs out there. You probably wouldn't have had these SNY groups because before there was nowhere to go. You couldn't just get to a prison, fuck up and say, hey, I want to go to PC. You know what I'm saying? You had to go out there to the main line. There was no other alternative. And you could be sent anywhere. And it was get out everywhere you went. You know what I'm saying? There was yards where we coexisted, but it was only a matter of time before something kicked off. Someone did something. The diplomacy of prison politics didn't work its way out, and motherfuckers were getting on each other's helmets and getting off. And back then, when you got off, man, these lockdowns were like 6 to 9 months at times, yeah. Especially on those level fours. You know what I'm saying? So administration didn't care. They would set things up to where, bam, you get off, they lock you down for fucking a year. So that's why everybody used to wait till after third draw, bam, then they get off. You know what I'm saying? You know, the system was a whole different type of atmosphere, man. You know, as opposed to now, you get a household roster. It's very rare you're going to see someone over 40 years old on that roster. And see, that was the only thing that they requested from you when you got to a mainline or prison back then was to get their 5x5, their name, aka their age, where they're from, and the last prison they paroled from. That's it. They would submit that to the oil, and they'd have rosters of everybody. You know what I'm saying? Other prisons would send out rosters, boom, they'd go through those rosters. If you were lucky enough at that time, you would have a channel to the Bay and see pretty much through probably what you would call NRA. So eventually someone could be on that line. It maybe takes 3 months to a year to find out what their standings was. Some people had faster channels than others. And this is how things used to operate. And so a lot of OGs would keep it solid because they knew eventually they'd be found out. They did the bare minimum as far as household expectations, but they were able to program like a convict. Now everybody has to follow under this bandera. Whether you're Sureño, Norteño, Wood, you have to follow some rules. Back then you had rules, but they weren't fucking as extreme. You know what I'm saying? You had those that were politicking and those that were just fucking manpower that were part of the cause, part of the movement, part of the people. You know, and at times this bred separation. You know, Solana was a prime example. You know, you had those that they used to call stragglers, which were those that were not striving. They were homeboys, but they didn't want to do the fucking patrols. They didn't want to do the observation posts. They didn't want to have a channel positioned. You know, you know. Then you had those that were politicking, those that were either structure, you know what I'm saying, or when I was in Solano, they used to call them A1s, which was a strong sympathizer to the NR movement. They used to have their own little format, education, and you go through a period of where you know you're trying to be you're under basically as an NR candidate. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, they're going to put more responsibility on you. It could be to partake in a movida. It could be to hold a COC position, sentry duty, observation post, whatever it may be. You're going to hold a position within that chain of command, but you're still going to be on the outside of that inner circle, which is going to be basically the hermanos that hold the position of authority. You know, like I said, it was a trip now. You know what I'm saying? When I left the system back in 2006, I think seven, it was different. You know what I'm saying? You didn't the same OGs that I used to look up to or thought were fucking right, cool dudes, the veteranos, were now fucking in SMY. You know what I'm saying? They'd go, they'd get out to the streets. I'd run into some of them. They wouldn't know my standings or status, and sometimes I'd have dudes that would sit there trying to tell me they were carnals. You know what I'm saying? But they were all in fucking drunk stupor and shit. And a couple of times I gave dudes passes because they were my homeboys' uncles and shit. They were just fucking drunk and wanted to act like they were something that they weren't. You know what I'm saying? So I just let them fucking toot their own horn. Then I'd have to pull them to the side and say, bro, you ain't who the fuck you say you are. And then they would shut the fuck up. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, down south, the same thing. Once the prison organizations took more control of the streets, which they've always had control of the streets, don't get it twisted, right? But more involvement in these hoods, more involvement to what an individual did in prison, whether he owed a drug debt, he did burnt his home or whatnot, you started to see less of these viejos because a lot of these viejos, let's keep it real at that time, were fucking dope fiends. You know what I'm saying? They come from that 70s, 80s era where fucking gangbanging wasn't really about gangbang, but it was about being in the mix, being fucking on dope, partying, doing stupid shit. That's the era that they came from. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, this is Flacco Convict's perspective, man. Just my fucking perspective of it, what I seen, what I experienced, man. And it's kind of sad because traditionally, this is what you would see as a kid. This is what you kind of aspired to be. You know what I mean? I don't know why you want to aspire to be a fucking dope and expect the rest of most of his life in prison. But as a youngster, you looked up to these OGs, man. They always had good stories, tell you about the get out, YA, prison, and whatnot, man. And a lot of us used to sit there and just be fucking that out about it. You know what I mean? Saying, damn, man, that's how it used to be. And it made you want to be part of that. You know, like I said, the influences today are going to be key to the future. You know what I'm saying? So those of us that are in their 30s and 40s, if you're still active out there, man, and you have some say so with these kids, man, try to reach out to them, man. Guide them the right way, not the way that we were misled, man. And I know a lot of you guys have the same feelings when I talk about that, but a lot of times we're more worried about how we're looked at by others. Therefore, a lot of people aren't going to fall out of favor with the gente. That said, your boy Flacco, I'm gone.